Hi, this is Alan Shea, and we're here at the Robinson Center in Pasadena, and we have one of the esteemed guests for today's event who's going to share his name and give us a little insight about, first of all, what this event today is all about, and then he's going to really give us some in-depth conversations about media, community, and certainly global community. And that's why I'm honored to have this gentleman here with us and who can share with you viewers a real insight from a global perspective, especially when it comes to media. So why don't you share your name and give them an insight of what this event today that you're here and how has it impacted the Pasadena community this week?
Great. Well, Alan, thank you so much for inviting me here, and I'm so glad to be in Southern California right now and happen to come at a great time. My name is Meredith Beal. I'm the Senior Technology Advisor for the African Media Initiative, which is the largest umbrella organization of media owners on the African continent. And I'm also the Media Technology Advisor for United Religions Initiative Africa, which is the largest umbrella organization of interfaith activities. So between those two entities, it allowed me just a great deal of freedom in terms of traveling the continent and interacting with a wide range of people to see what's going on there. How I wound up getting there was the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded a program to strengthen the management skills of media owners. And this was back in 2011. They did a global search and selected me to manage this project. So I've been headquartered in Nairobi since 2011 and had projects in about 20 countries, which range from I wrote a book on digital TV migration, so workshops on that. I did workshops on financial management for media execs, which is targeted kind of CFOs up. I brought NASA scientists over to Uganda to share space data with the agricultural researchers and scientists, and evangelizing the open data movement. And also the first person to bring the Federal Communication Commissions from the FCC out of the United States to share their expertise, first in Kenya and then other African countries. Now it's a regular part of their activities. So I'm really appreciate having a dream job which allowed me to travel in Africa. I've always wanted to live there, but didn't know how to make it make sense. And when I got that call initially from the National Association of Broadcasters, I jumped right on it. So I'm here today. Actually, I come as often as I can because my mom is 89 and my sister, who happens to be city attorney and chief prosecutor for the city of Pasadena. So I come as often as I can, aging quickly and time is going, so I make every effort to come. And so I came to visit my mom, and it happened that a delegation from a city called Dakar Plateau, a city in Senegal, West Africa, has a sister city relationship which they were consummating on this week. So the delegation arrived, I imagine over the weekend or something, and I got here about a week or so ago. And so I think, Sunday they started with a soccer tournament between Mexico and Senegal. But the mayor of Dakar Plateau and a delegation of about 10 officials from that city came to meet the city officials from Pasadena and had a week-long series of activities which ranged from visiting the Norton Simon Museum, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Tuesday they were at the Caltech's Space Exploration Lab at the drone place where they design and test drones. Just fascinating, incredible stuff that they're working on these days. Yesterday at the Al Kabulan Cultural Center up in Pasadena, the Culture Center hosted a reception. And so it's been a week of fraternity and camaraderie and African unity and the weather accommodating as well. Just been a really nice week for that. So I was glad I was able to participate and be around at this time.
Well, what we'd like to share with the viewers, and we'll start with really the event that Pasadena has been hosting all week. How important is the sister city relationship that has been consummated with Senegal and Pasadena? How important is that moving forward with international relationship?
Well, more and more it's become quite apparent that we're in a global world, and the interdependency of everyone is really underscored and overlooked. And so the more we understand about this global dependency and connection, the wiser the decisions we make around trade, economic policy, immigration. All of these things are all interconnected, and bringing wise decisions to the table will make a big difference going forward, because the world is changing quickly, and that rate of change is also increasing exponentially. So a few months' time, a lot goes by when it used to take several years to reveal a particular result from an action or from a policy. So that's why I think the more we know about what's going on outside, one of the drawbacks I think from media here is we don't hear enough about what's going on everywhere else. I personally believe that unless you've left the United States, you don't know what's going on outside. And I encourage everybody, passport's only $100, Nikes are $300 or something. So get a passport and go somewhere and see what's going on. So I appreciate being able to watch news from Turkey and China and India and Germany, everywhere else, and hearing a broader range of thought and perspective on what's going on and where the world is headed. So this sister-city relationship, though it is primarily ceremonial, and most of the city-sister relationships I've seen all over the world are pretty much of a ceremonial nature. Every now and then I see something maybe concrete come out in terms of commerce or cultural exchange. But that cultural exchange is an important part of being human beings and understanding who else is out there and what other aspects of and characteristics of humanity are there. And the more we interact, and because the world's getting smaller and smaller, we have to interact, so we have to figure out how to get along.
I'm gonna have to interject because you just hit some buttons there, and I think the viewers would really like your experience, certainly of this week, with the dignitaries being here in Pasadena, and how did they receive the Pasadena community with being here. I mean, because we are very unique. As you know, we're probably the only city in America that has our own stadium, our own major institution like Caltech, plus we have about 4 other universities here, our own municipality, and we're very small with a big image. Big, right. So for the delegates to come here and see the type of engagement that they've received, but yet this is a relatively small city because our population, as you may or may not know, is about 150,000.
Okay. Well, they were quite welcomed and felt it was a great hospitable reception. Dakar Plateau is also a small city. I mean, Dakar is the capital of Senegal, but that's a huge population, and so maybe there's some compatibility around how you operate in small municipalities. But I think more than anything, this fraternity, sorority bond of human interaction, and hey, here's who we are, here's the things that are important to us. And I found in my travels, most people around the world want the same thing. They want to be safe, have a comfortable and safe place to live. They want to be able to work and be productive, and they want for their children to be have more opportunity than they had. Around the world, most folks, that's all they're bothered about. There's other folks at other layers who are more concerned with, various complications of society and rules and control and a lot of stuff. But most people just want to be happy working and bringing up their kids happy.
And with that, it's going to be a beautiful segue, because one of the things that really amazed me about being excited about meeting with you is your story. You shared with me your beginnings, especially in Texas, and how your beginnings, especially with the media, and how that transformed into the opportunities you have today. So can you share some of that with the viewers and let them know that it's not an instant, it's a commitment?
Um, yes, it is. It is a commitment. And my first job in the media, my first real job, major job in the media was as a reporter for the Los Angeles Times when I was 20, and with a byline. And uh, my mentor in journalism, Betty White, was a professor at Cal State, and she opened that door. And once I got into being at the largest, at the time it was the largest and richest newspaper in the world, um, I got to see firsthand what manipulation of information is about. And I would see the information coming across the teletype, and I would see the story that went out. I was like, that ain't what happened. And so it taught me not to believe anybody. It taught me the value of doing your own primary research. And because I've been fortunate enough to travel broadly, I have friends everywhere, and many of them are journalists almost everywhere. So if I see something on CNN or BBC or Al Jazeera, I call one of my buddies and, hey, what's your take on what I'm looking at? And, so that evolved over many years in terms of where I've come to now in terms of my range of network and people I can touch on. I mean, to the point where today on my WhatsApp, there's a South Sudan media WhatsApp group. So in real time, I'm seeing them talking to each other. Hey, there's a press conference with the general at 4 o'clock. Well, yesterday, what he said. And, so having, so I was saying, I'm looking day to day at what's going on in South Sudan, which is very critical. And by the way, Monday, Karen Bass's office is doing an update call on what's going on in South Sudan, which is open. So, but we can see their conversation on what's going on, and that's faster, and Twitter and all those things are faster than it takes time to get into the newspaper or to other media. So being at the Times gave me, skills and exposure at a high level. But then the biggest lesson was that how to read in between the lines. I mean, by now we're inundated. There is too much information in the world. We're just overwhelmed with data. What we need to develop is the ability to discern, to read between the lines, to discern truth from falsehood based on that data. And it's hard because there are forces around that have almost unlimited budget to influence public opinion. I mean, in the old days, public opinion was managed through the classroom and the pulpit, but in the evolution of radio and then TV, and then he took it to a whole nother level. And now TV is the primary generator of public opinion, or has been until maybe the last few years. Who knows what it is now. So the importance of that, and I've always been concerned of that, especially growing up in Los Angeles in the 50s and 60s, and the race situation, and in living in LA, but my father's from Marshall, Texas, in East Texas. My mother's from Arkansas. So every year the family would go back and forth, and driving through Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, I would see how my father and mother would change their demeanor when they encountered law enforcement, the places where we could not eat and could not go to the bathroom, all that. So I was exposed to that, and then watching the civil rights movement and activities on television, it affected me deeply. So I was concerned with people getting the right information. So over the years that journalism stayed, I wound up editing magazines and newspapers. I also wanted to be I was a scientist. I was a chemist in the daytime, and I was the editor at a music trade magazine at nighttime. And at some point, I quit and became editor-in-chief of the R&B report, the Rhythm and Blues report, which opened a whole bunch of doors because everybody wants to be on the cover of a magazine. So, the record companies were constantly courting you, trying to get their folks on. So it opened some more doors for me. And still, all this time is still, what's the source of news? And when you have an entity here like the National Newspaper Publishers Association, I remember, this is about 90, 91, 92, somewhere around that time, I helped put on their annual conference with an event planner that was my partner. And one of the things I was asking them, the black newspapers, the Sentinel, the Philadelphia Inquirer, there were, when I was young, there were 200 black-owned newspapers across the country. Now, in 2030, and it's deep. So I was asking, where are you guys getting your news from? If you're printing what's from AP and UPI and Reuters, how do you know what's really happening? And I was encouraging them to develop relationships directly, and they weren't paying much attention to me. I was a youngster. The keynote speaker that year was Minister Farrakhan. And that's the first thing he jumped on. It's like, do you have relationships with African newspapers? Then if you don't, how do you know what you're saying about South Africa or Nigeria or whatever? Who's vetting that information? So after I left the R&B report and I went to Motown Records. After Berry Gordy sold the company to Boston Ventures, and my partner, brother, I grew up with a guy named Jonathan Clark. He was 9 and I was 8 when we met on Little League Baseball Park. We've been friends for years. So he was vice president at Motown, and he brought me in as director of marketing. And Motown had no computers when we came. So if you can imagine in the 1980s, a multi-million-dollar corporation functioning without computers. So I brought my Mac, and Jonathan brought his, and then Busby, the president, saw how efficient he was and said, hey, we'll get it for everybody. So I wound up designing an architecture for the whole company, linking the New York, Chicago, and LA offices through a wide area network. And so my other hat on the other side of director of marketing was the MIS director. And so I left Motown to go to Dell Computer. So Michael Dell was putting together a team, he's already rolling and opening the door to direct marketing and internet commerce. So in 1995, I moved to Austin and to work with Dell, and I became Dell's first global webmaster. And by that, I mean that my job was to go to Japan, hire webmaster for Japan, for China, for Malaysia, for England, for 23 countries. Then manage that team and create this global architecture. So that was another dream job, which exposed me to technology at the highest level. I got to hang out with the folks at Intel and Microsoft, and another dream job. While I was at Dell, I purchased several radio stations in Texas. There wound up being 4 radio stations in Texas. And again, it was around the notion of controlling the information that people are being exposed to. It's like, I have confidence in the news that I'm broadcasting to people. So based on that, it's like, at least the people in this circle, I know what I'm saying to them is real. And so that opened a whole nother door of another chapter of adventures, a whole nother movie by itself. The first 2 stations I bought were in a town called Jasper, Texas. And I don't know if you're familiar with Jasper, but Jasper's deep East Texas, not East Texas. There's something called deep East Texas. And that's almost like from the other end, from the end of Appalachia and East Texas and Louisiana, right in that little circle, is like the deepest enclave of KKK historically. And in 1998, there was a dragging death of a man named James Byrd Jr. by 3 white supremacists who had recently got out of jail. And so I knew about the dragging death, but I didn't realize the place was as deep as all that. So it was 2 years later that I bought the stations. But because I was an absentee owner, I was still working at Dell, so it was an investment. And so I kept, same staff, same white people running the station, same general manager, and I would visit a couple of times a year. So it was about 2 years before they found out I was black. They sabotaged a transmitter. They harassed my customers. They harassed my employees. They filed frivolous complaints with the Federal Communications Commission. So I was under investigation for years for frivolous stuff. They just wanted to keep me spending money on attorneys, and that was their recreation, I guess. And so the town was half black, half white. The mayor was black, and half city council, half. So it was a laboratory of race relations that was really deep. And the backdrop of the James Byrd killing, the Black Panthers coming, the KKK coming, the whole place was crazy for a while. So I'm coming behind that. And so when they did find out, but they were concerned, oh, he's going to change the station to hip hop. So they were concerned about, one of the stations was country, the other one was an ABC News affiliate. Also because I was the ABC affiliate, Nightline decided to come to Jasper to visit 5 years after. And so they announced, they were coming to Jasper, and the town's all up in roars because, hey, they made us look like fools the last time. We're already looked like idiots to the world. And, a lot of the townspeople were wondering why the city councilmen were letting them back. And we're saying, well, they need to see that, we're not the same as during that time period or whatever. So it became a whole nother challenging time that I created a TV show, which, when Nightline, somebody goes on Nightline, there's always somebody standing in line when Ted Koppel's through who didn't get their 2 cents in. So I figured that was probably going to happen. So I planned a community affairs show the next day after Nightline to carry on the dialogue, because I was sure there'd be somebody wanting to talk. Sure enough, James Byrd Jr.'s son was standing in line and didn't get to say anything. So the next day I had him on. I had some of the ministers who were instrumental in keeping the town from blowing up. It was fascinating. And that became, a whole new show, a community affairs show for the community, that lasted for a while.
And that's really interesting, Meredith, how you articulate this journey, because how much does that experience from, you said it's back as far as 98?
I bought the station in 2000.
Okay.
And 2002, 3, 4 is when, the mess started going on.
So how relevant that experience back in 2000 is it in today's society, especially with the administration and the plight of minorities now that you see have been almost reversed everything that has been issued over the last certainly 30 years and recently since Obama's left office?
Well, Ferguson is a classic example. And Ferguson, we're not talking about 1950 or 60 or 70 or 80 or 90s. We're in 21st century and we have a Ferguson. So that should tell you a lot about where we are today and the fact that so many people. I had a friend who was from Ferguson, and she'd been telling me for years how it was, and I had no idea until I saw on TV armed military forces attacking civilians in the streets. Even though in 1967 I was in Los Angeles and I saw tanks on Florence and Crenshaw, National Guard tanks on Florence and Crenshaw, when we were taking my grandmother to the train station to go back to Texas, and we were stopped and, where are you going, where are we, show us your papers, basically. But on the other side of the fence in racial relations in Texas was, I also owned another station in a town called Hamilton, which is about an hour and a half north of Austin, Texas. And there wasn't a black person who lived in the whole county, but they embraced me and appreciated the fact that I maintained this America's oldest country western station. And because of this peculiar profile I have of, black dreadlocked Rasta Buddhist, Rasta, so I brought so much attention. Like I said, even the good old boys had to laugh at that. And at one point, Hamilton was a place where about 20 miles north of there, a place called Hyco, the KKK came down in March. There was a brother from some town in Texas not too far, and he was a UPS driver. And when I first got there, people kept calling me Michael. And because he was, they thought, so I thought, hey, all black people look like. But when I finally saw him, he does look like me. And one day I saw him about a block away, and he was getting off the truck, and I rushed down, but I couldn't catch him. But anyway, he brought a gospel choir from his church to perform for the community of Hamilton. And the KKK came down to, protest. and the sheriff and the townspeople ran him off. And when they came down to try to protest my presence, the sheriff and the townspeople ran them off. So now in a town where there's no black people in the county, they had Meredith Beal Day in 2007, September 2007, because I had been named Texas Broadcaster of the Year, and they wound up on ABC World News Tonight, the cover of the Houston Chronicle, the cover of Radio World Magazine, all this press came. So some of the businessmen in the community approached the mayor and said, hey, we'd like to show our appreciation for the attention that Meredith brought to the town. So they did a Meredith Beal Day. So it's been a whole range of race relations on both sides of, positive and negative. But it shows that we have a lot of work to do. We've never really had the dialogue. We never had the conversation. The conversation is going to be forced, and we should have it soon, so it's not as forced in terms of physically forced.
And before I let you go, I gotta pose these two questions to you, because you're a man in media, and I think it's really imperative that the viewers understand the significance of this interview, not only as it ties to the events here in Pasadena, with Senegal being a sister city with Pasadena, but how important is the media for minority community and for a real presence moving forward, because there has been a lot of negative images, certainly here in America. And of course, now that you live in Africa and what they show us from Africa, that also falls into a negative, until we meet with a person like yourself who really articulate the advancements and the value that Africa brings. We don't know that.
Well, it's about knowing people, and that's one of the other great benefits of having the sister city.
So we want to thank you. And viewers, hopefully you've gotten some great information. And in closing, I'm going to let Meredith Beal give us a sense of purpose about how to move forward.
Education is one of the biggest tools, levers to elevate everybody. Dialogue. Because we're all human beings and we're animals. As we tap our humanity, our actions become higher. So the more we interact with trying to discern the heart of another person, Desmond Tutu says that you and I can only be human together. So let's be human.
Wow. With that said, this is Alan Shea signing off with Our Society Show, and we thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.